Hi everybody, welcome back to Raise Your Vibes. This is Miriam Khan. I am really happy today to have a lovely, esteemed author like myself. We have another guest on our show. Welcome to Allison Dagney. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and be part of your show.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here. Allison, please tell me the title of your book and tell me what inspired you to write this particular book.
So the title of my book is called When Tears Leave Scars, and a little bit of background about me is my history is I entered into a narcissistically abusive relationship unknowingly at the age of 19. So I went straight from, being with my parents to meeting, that's right, to meeting a man when I was a very young woman who was the same age as me when I was in college. We had a whirlwind love bombing relationship at the beginning, and we married within 2.5 years. And throughout the course of the next 20 years that I was with him, we were married for about 17 years. Yeah. There was always this nagging feeling about how horrible of a person that I was. And I always felt like every issue that happened in our entire marriage was because of me. And I went on this, constant search for trying to be better, for trying to be a better mom, for trying to be a better wife, for trying to be a better Christian, for trying to be better in every aspect of my life, because I felt like that I was never good enough. Sure. There were lots and lots of things that happened throughout those years, as you can imagine. And I wrote the book because I ended up discovering the truth about what was happening to me. Yeah. When I thought that it was something that I was doing wrong, I thought that I was going crazy. Yeah. I thought I had some mental issues. I thought there was something wrong with me. Come to find out, it was not that case at all. And I ended up doing lots and lots of research and figuring out what was the truth. And I never did tell him that I knew that about him, but I escaped the marriage.
I'm glad you did so. It's quite difficult, because I was expecting you to say, for example, you stayed 5 years, 6 years. In my case, it was 6 years. And I have to commend you, because recently I've been working with a lot of females, counseling them, privately, obviously. Some of them have been in that marriage for 40 plus years, and they are drained, exhausted. You're almost in I'm sure we'll discuss this in more depth. You feel like you're in your own prison, although you're not in a prison, but you feel like you are in a prison. And I think people don't really understand how difficult it is, and they don't understand the journey we have. We're changed forever. Right. We're changed forever by it. And I applaud you, and I think you're very brave. I also think you had a lot of strength to stay for 17 years, because I think that's the other side that people don't see. People think and presume, and I did. I witnessed very close people growing up with me, and I used to think that person's a coward for not leaving. That person, because I'll be honest, in my younger days I was judgmental, and I think a lot of us can understand, a lot of us can sympathize and can relate. But now I actually see that individual that's very, very close to me, and I actually think that person's a lioness, because they've taken every bit of strength to cope every day without uttering a word to anybody.
Right. It takes a lot. It takes a lot out of you. It takes a lot of emotional and mental energy, even physical energy, really, because, there were so many things that were expected of me. I ended up being a stay-home mom. I, had been convinced to quit my job and be a mom, just like his mom. And, throughout that, it was, always wanting to be better, always wanting to please someone else, that kind of codependency part of me. But, I was the person who did for everyone. I did everything. I never did for me. It was never about me. It was always about everyone else.
They do. Yeah. I don't know what it is, whether it's something that they target, but they seem to go for people that are very loving, caring, nurturing people. You may have seen one of my posts that I did recently, I think, the one where I had like Sarah O'Connor from Terminator, the housewife that she was before, and then Sarah O'Connor with the gun. And because recently I've been teaching myself how to actually go and use a weapon purely within a licensed, field. But it gave me this sort of like metaphorical strength. You know,
it does.
That I'm armed and I'm not dangerous, but I'm armed and I'm ready and mentally and physically. Come on then. If you know, because when somebody that you're in a loving, caring relationship with, or so you think, you know, you're in a marriage like you are, threatens to kill you, and it actually means it's scary as something. I'm not going to say the word.
Yes, it is.
But you know, you can imagine. And these people are very manipulative. They're very cunning. They're very sly. They will do everything to undermine everything that you are. And they pick on kind people and turn us into something else. So,
yeah, and I think when you said that about the Sarah Connor thing, I mean, that's really what my book is about. It is literally, it goes from that transformation of being this kind of submissive housewife, abused female, to taking my power back and saying, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to let this happen. So it's very inspirational as far as what I've heard, as far as reviews and people have told me. Awesome. But that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to provide hope. I wanted to provide inspiration. And I wanted to also expose what this is, because my ex-husband is a covert narcissist. And the covert ones are the ones you never expect. When you tell someone about it, they are shocked. They are like, no way. There's no way that person could do something like that. Because when the door's closed at home, that's when
nobody knows.
The other side unleashed.
Nobody knows, because I can relate to that, to myself. People saw us as the power couple. People saw us as in love, two people that are matched together. Their personalities matched together. They bounce off each other. There are no issues. And then it's only when you step back, although things are happening to you, and your friends don't really twig, do they? Your friends don't really realize. And it's only when you step real back and you look at the wounds and the scars that they leave forever. Some of those will never, ever, ever heal. Never. You know, but one of the quotes I saw, if I can recall it correctly, is, you know, these scars are turning into stars. You know, and that's the way I look at it. You know, and I think that's quite nice and quite positive, because, you know, there are some of us that don't make it out. There are some of us struggling to get out. And, you know, there are some of us that are too afraid to speak up or to even make those changes. What was it for you that made you make that big decision of, I've got to get out? Because you were in it for a long time.
I was. And you know what it was? It was my kids. It was my kids, because at the time my children were, 12, 10, and 8, I think.
Yeah.
And once I started to understand what this disorder is, and I started to read about it and really truly accept that's what he was. And it was hard to accept that. It was hard to accept that he didn't love me. It was hard to accept he didn't love his children. It was hard to accept that he would do these things on purpose.
How can
and it
they
was
love
really
anybody?
shocking.
How can they love anybody, Allison, when they don't love themselves?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And so, you know, when the kind of sticking point for me was thinking, I cannot let my children grow up the rest of their, you know, childhoods thinking that this is okay. I have to show them, you know, and we have 50-50 custody, but I was willing to take the 50-50 and use my 50 to model good parenting, to model non-narcissistic behavior, things that are healthy for my kids, because, and I'm glad I did, because it works out that way, that they go to their dads and then they come back to me and they're, you know, having meltdowns and they're, you know, complaining and their negative energy, and I've got to kind of reduce that. And
that's not
so
easy.
that was really that was the biggest thing for me. I mean, my kids were just the most important thing at that moment. Like me, yes, but I was like, you know what? I can save myself from this, but I've really got to protect them. And I can't protect them if I'm here. I can't.
Sure.
So that was a big sticking point for me.
One of the things I want to ask you, because this is an important one. I know a couple of ladies that I have counselled recently that are in a very, very similar boat to you. Okay, and I don't have children, and in some regards, people might think that's a blessing, but actually, it's still difficult to get out. But what I'm saying is there's lots more entanglement. I'm going to use that word. Please forgive me if you think that's offensive. But there is more entanglement when children are involved, because they use them as a weapon. You know, and they use them because they're a vulnerable part of getting to you. and they are a vulnerable part of attacking you and getting you to go back. So somebody I know is going through this, and maybe we can give that individual advice, because they're in that situation where they tried to leave a year ago, and they did, only to turn back. Now they've left again, and I'm so proud of the fact that this person's left again. This time their child is with them, okay? And, the ex, soon-to-be ex, who's making life very, very difficult, has gone to extremes of hunting her down. Let's put it like that, okay? And you can understand that apprehension, that tension, the stress, the constant looking over your shoulder. You're already psychologically warped because you've come out of war. That's the best way I can describe it. If I felt physically, emotionally, spiritually, religiously drained as hell, and I couldn't even look after myself, I wonder how she feels with a child.
Right.
And doing things like, for example, the recent things, and I'm not trying to give anyone ideas, but there's a new thing called AirTags, to do with your iPhone, where you can place them on an object in a place and you can track that person down. Forget GPS on your phone, forget iPhone, track my iPhone, this. How about being so sneaky that you're putting in items like your child's car seat or your child's, bottle or some, rucksack, so that you know exactly where that person's gone when they've left you and they're tracking you down. Games like turning up when they found that person, turning up with the spare car key that person's forgotten, that was there. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do,
okay?
Yeah.
So some narcissists will go to very, very, very extreme, depths to try and get that person back. And unfortunately, the law is not on your side. That makes it difficult too. So what, we'll go through perhaps my top tips. What top tips have you got for someone with children in this situation?
So in my situation, because my ex-husband was not, for the most part, physically abusive, stalking type of person, he did everything very covertly, very sneaky, very insidiously to manipulate me. But I have talked to many people who have been in similar situations as this person that you're speaking about. And in my situation, what I did, and this is what I preach and what I tell everyone to do, is to plan. Because planning is so valuable and so important. And if you don't have a solid plan, to me, that's like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to get up and go run a marathon tomorrow, which I've never done before, but I'm just going to get up and go do that.
Yeah. You
might be able to get to the finish line eventually, but you're going to stop a lot. You're going to get dehydrated. Yeah. You might have to, lay down, or you might get blisters on your feet, or whatever that might be. So, but if you plan and you prepare yourself for that marathon, and it might take you a while, you will be able to set yourself up for more success.
I agree. The difficulty is sometimes, not always, sometimes, is that when they've knocked your self-esteem so low, you can't think straight. Your head is confused. Your head is muddled. We've all go through different stages of coming out of narcissism, correct? And abuse. Because to be fair, abuse and narcissism are technically similar. Okay, they're not the same. They're similar. But your mind is so frazzled, I think that's the best way to say it, that you can't think straight. Now, I think of it as like a game of chess. When I was coming out of my marriage, I had to maneuver it fast. And I had to play it like chess. Where am I going to put my king? Where am I going to put my queen?
Right.
What do I need to protect? We say it in England, we say put your ducks in a row. Get your ducks in a row. I had to forward think 20 steps ahead of him of what he was going to do. And everything I put in action, exactly to the T, he did. Yeah? To the point where he was shocked that I'd done this, which made him more angry. Okay?
And that is actually probably a lot of people underestimate themselves. A lot of victims and survivors underestimate themselves, but you know that person better than anybody else. You know the true them. You know what they do, what they say, what their wants and their needs and their desires are better than anybody else. Yes. So really, you can predict their next move.
Sure.
You can think about if this happens. And I still have to do that. I do it every single day with my ex because we share kids, so I have to think about what's going to happen down the road. It always is that way. So that's a really good
Sometimes sometimes it's not always possible to do. You have to have, and this is the other thing I personally learned, and the person I'm talking about learned as well, is that you really do find out who your true friends are, and family.
Yes.
And family, because in a lot of cases, including mine, there were people who I was so close to that I could call like a brother or a sister, that said to me, what are you doing? This is a marriage. You don't do divorce. You need to stay. Doesn't matter what that person's doing, forgive. And I was like, excuse me? No. And this is priests, this is or priestess, or it was even people that were close to me. I lost so many people, because some of it was they didn't want to know, okay? And they were almost like this attitude of shut up and put up with it. Or why are you complaining about this little thing? It's a small thing. They didn't get it. They didn't want to get it, okay?
Right.
Then the ones that really did get what was going on were almost like, sorry, this is too much to handle and I'm bowing out.
Yeah.
Okay?
And what...
Go on, sorry.
What I would say, no, that's okay. What I would say to certain people too is look at the people when you're reaching out for help, because like in your case, your friends, your family, and then people are saying, oh my gosh, you shouldn't be leaving. I found that the best people to reach out to are the ones that hated the narcissist, hated that person, the ones that you were isolated from, the ones that you weren't allowed to hang out with. Because when you go to them and you say, look, this is what's happened to me, and they're like, oh, we're going after him now, I'm going to help you, whatever you need. And I think it takes a lot of humility to go back with your tail between your legs to some of those people who you may have cut out from your life, or who because the narcissist isolated you from them. But I feel like even people who you feel like are your closest friends are not really what they are.
No, and it was a big lesson. It was a big lesson, and I can relate to this with other individuals that I've helped as well, because for me, I was the breadwinner, and financially I was stable. I was the one working. I'm the go-getter. Yeah, but there are lots and lots of people in similar positions to yourself and me. And other people that we know, they're not in a financial position either. Like yourself, you were a mom. So financially, if you're saying about getting your ducks in a row and maneuvering forward, how do you do that when you've got no financial resources? So any top tips there, Allison, that you could share?
I do have tips, and I was actually very fortunate in my situation because we had a side business going. He worked, but I ran sort of the side business on my own. So I was able to take that with me when we divorced. And I know not everyone has that luxury. But things that, and I put a blog post on my website about this too. Things that I recommend that people do is, number one, is get your financial independence back. And people say, well, how do you do that? I haven't been working for this long. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. If the narcissist is so controlling that you absolutely cannot work outside of the home, you might have to suggest like homeschooling other people's children during a pandemic, babysitting, finding some sort of craft to sell online on Etsy or on Facebook Marketplace or something like that. And I actually recommend being sneaky. I mean, I know that might sound bad to certain people, but like if you tell the narcissist that you make $100 on, babysitting this person's child for the week, really it's 150, and you're going to pocket the rest. So because they're going to hold you accountable, they're going to say, "Hey, where's the money?" So
give it
in some regards, yes, in some regards, you have to be very crafty. You have to be sneaky, and I know a lot of people say, "I don't want to stoop to their level." I get it, I do. But if you have to get out and you have to escape, you may have to take on some things that you don't feel are becoming of you. In my opinion,
sometimes it's difficult to do the babysitting. Although it's a good suggestion, sometimes you might not want to bring an innocent child into that dynamic where it's toxic for you. Some people might not be able to do that. The person I'm referring to, for example, is moving potentially place from place. Other people I know, you can't always do that. Sometimes you can rely on benefits. I know in America you've got food stamps, you've got particular stimulus checks and so on. But again, if you've left someone who's a narcissist and they're the one getting the finances, you've got nothing.
No, you don't.
And that's
the one
hard.
thing, like in a marriage situation in the United States, for me, we ended up being, with my attorney, got me on status quo. So what that meant was everything that happened prior to this separation continued. So same credit cards, same bank accounts until the divorce was final.
That's good.
So I still had that ability to do that. And a lot of people don't know that is a possibility for them when they leave. That's another thing I think is really, really important. Here's the thing. If you don't have money and you can't go to a lawyer and put down a deposit or a retainer fee, how do you get help?
Yeah,
well, what I suggest is call around to multiple attorney firms and ask for a free consultation, and they always give them. So get a 30-minute or an hour-long consultation to ask questions, to say, do you think you could take my case? And a lot of times they'll give you free advice. They'll tell you, oh, you don't want to leave your house because if you leave the house, then he'll end up with the house. Or they'll just give you things in your state, because each state is different in the United States. They'll give you the actual legal advice that you need for free. Yeah. So I always recommend to do that.
And to be fair, most places, I mean, you know, we're talking on an international level. Obviously, I'm from England, you're from, you know, the States. We're going to have listeners from all over listening to this podcast. Mm-hmm. You know, depending on where you are, you know, check out, you know, some places, you know, like in the UK, you can have, we call it Citizens Advice Bureau. You might have similar places like that. Your local library, in most cases, I don't know about the States, they have some, you know, information. Even doctor surgeries have things like this as well, because it's becoming more and more, unfortunately, a frequent thing. And I think since COVID last year, it's become even more frequent. You know, you're seeing more and more signs, aren't you? I don't know if you've seen them in America, where it's doing the whole hand sign, where you put your thumb down and then you're putting the rest of your fingers down to say to someone, help. You know, these things are being, you know, shown more and more now in our media and our press, because people are recognizing this is a big, big issue. It's a big issue. We cannot sweep it under the carpet. We need to do something about it. We need to be proactive. You're doing an amazing thing with your book. You know, had you written before, Allison, or was this your first book?
You know, I was just thinking about that this morning. I wrote a book back years ago, maybe like 5 years ago, while I was still married. But I always had this like desire to write a book. I don't have like an English literature background or like anything like that, but I'm a creative person by nature, so I liked to write. I liked to write poetry when I was younger, and so I didn't really have like an idea about what I wanted to write. So I wrote a fiction book, like a science fiction book, but I never did anything with it. And it's sitting in a drawer right now, just printed out on a stack of paper. And then once I escaped this position of being this victim of a narcissist, I was like, I have to tell people about this. People have got to know and got to understand what it feels like to be a victim of emotional abuse. They have to know, because and what I have found is not only is that the case, but it's actually helping people who are family and friends of victims. Because somebody like my mom, who was isolated from me, who I didn't have really a relationship throughout my marriage because my ex-husband would not permit it. Books like this will help people like her, because they're like, will my child ever see? Will she ever understand what she's going through? Will she ever leave her abusive husband? It helps them kind of understand and relate. And not that it makes it okay, but it helps them understand, because a lot of people will go, why don't you just leave?
Exactly.
Why don't you just get out?
Exactly.
What's the problem?
People are this is what I'm saying to you, people are very judgmental, and they don't understand the dynamics of what that person's done. I mean, you know, you seem very headstrong. I'm very, very headstrong. I'm very vocal, as you can hear, you know. And for someone to select me, I said this in a prior podcast with another author, you know, that I interviewed. And I said that he selected me from the beginning. He took someone very strong, very outspoken, very independent, you know. And it was almost like he was looking for a challenge. And even now, with the whole divorce situation and going through divorce and coming out the other side of divorce, they will do everything they can to entice you to, you know, say that they're in power. It's an ego and egged sort of trip. And there are times that you look back on that relationship, you can try and nip things in the bud, you know. I was hit. I was threatened with a knife. There was various other things I've had happen to me. I've come off minor in comparison to the ladies that I've counseled, and men. If I'm honest, this is not just a female situation. Let's just make this clear. Narcissism, you know, can be in a female too, as well as a male. But it's not easy to walk away from. And the trauma, the emotional scars, the healing you have to do afterwards is not easy. So how long did it take you to like recover, I guess? Because before you wrote the book, I presume there was a period where you're having to look after you and your children.
Yeah, so when I wrote the book, I actually wrote it through my healing. And you get to see some of that through the book. You get to see, you know, some of the therapy sessions and things like that. Because I felt like I needed to have some of those raw emotions throughout the book. It was really hard to go back to the past because you have to relive the abuse. You have to relive the experiences that you went through. So that was hard, but it's also healing. And as far as making sure I take care of myself, I really, really, really put my healing as number one priority, because it's like when you get on an airplane and they tell you, don't put the mask on anybody else before you put it on yourself. I knew I couldn't help my kids until I helped me. And I felt so unbelievably controlled even after I left. I felt like, why am I having anxiety attacks? Why am I having these triggering moments? And I'm like, I'm not even with him.
Yep.
But I still felt like he was controlling myself.
It's the control, because what you don't realize, I think none of us realize until we've left that situation, we're victims of trauma, and we're victims of course, sort of like PTSD. We have the trauma afterwards too, because there's things that have happened to us and we're almost in autopilot, but you're sort of always thinking something's going to drop on my head, a bomb's going to drop, what's going to happen now? And then when you're free, you know, and I'm saying free inverted commas, you still think you're trapped. You still think you're in this prison, and it's your prison of thoughts. It's your prison of, this has been your routine. You're conditioned like Pavlov's dogs, to bring psychology into it. And it takes a long time to uncondition and retrain yourself to think this is acceptable. You know?
Right.
For example, it could be something innocent like opening the door to someone where before you weren't allowed. How dare you open the door? I can remember doing that. I can remember innocently the doorbell went to our house, where I paid the bills, and the doorbell went, obviously I'm going to go see who it is. And I was screamed at and shouted at, like, how dare you open the door? How dare you? This could be someone who wants you. And I'm like, what the hell? I just could not understand, like, this, like, mindset of, like, what? And it was someone who came to tell me, oh, by the way, this is your electric bill, you know, or whatever it was. Bearing in mind that I've owned my own house, you know, prior to that incident, I'd owned my house for like 15, 16 years in England. I'd paid every bill, you know, myself. You know, I'm quite capable. Someone might look at that and think that's weird, it's chauvinistic, but it wasn't. It was control. It was, you are this person, you will stay quiet, and you will just move to the side. I am the one that will dominate. Even though he had to turn around and say, can I have this much money to pay the bill? That's the hypocrisy, you know? Well,
and, you know, when you were talking about, like, a lot of people ask this question, like on my Instagram or my Facebook, they'll say, how long until you heal? And is there like a timeline, like for every 5 years of abuse, how many years to heal? There is no timeline. And really what I learned is that my commitment to heal had to be stronger than the story of my abuse.
Correct.
So though I wrote this book, though it's out there, though it's the story, that's not me.
No.
That's not who I am, and it doesn't define me. So you have to...
It's a chapter of your life, Allison. It's a chapter of your life. It's not your whole book. You've closed that chapter and you've moved forward. But some people don't. That's the thing.
Right.
They stay in the patterns of behavior. I've done CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Some people stay in this almost like this, rat race, running round and round, making the same choices, the same partners, the same selection, not moving forward. You're right. Your healing starts with you, and you can't put a time frame on it. One of the things I realized was I am not wasting. Yes, I'm going to be crying. Yes, I'm going to be emotionally drained, and that's cathartic, like you said. Yeah, it's good to grieve because this is a grievance. This is almost like a death because it's the death of your relationship. the death of your hopes, your joys, your dreams, your love, the death of your marriage or relationship, whatever it was, whatever label you'd given it, you put this person on a pedestal at some point. They've come crashing down. So you put this person on a pedestal, and at some point they come crashing down. They come crashing down with an almighty bang, okay? And we don't realise the impact of that bang. We have thought that, okay, they're not necessarily, like, people have this label of Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or Prince Charming or Princess Charming, whatever it is. But to you, they were your everything, And for that to be ripped apart into pieces takes time. And we do have to grieve. Each of us will grieve in our different ways, and heal in our different ways. I made sure I started putting me first again. I'm still on that journey, and I will. I was mentioning to you today, I went to learn how to sail. It is something I've wanted to do for a long time. Guess what? I did it today. Okay?
That's amazing.
In that relationship, I couldn't. When I was mentioning the gun range, that was pushing me to go do something again that gave me strength. And people, my close friends were like, "Oh, you're doing something crazy again." I was like, "No, I'm doing this for me because it's giving me strength and it's giving me adrenaline and it's making me feel strong physically and mentally. It's something I need to do." So what other things did you do, to help you through that? With your healing, what have you done to get you through this?
So I did therapy. I still go to therapy, and it's been 3.5 years. And I have a therapist who I absolutely adore, and she helps me get down to the heart and the root of the issues, kind of peeling back those layers. The thing that I felt like my most important aspect of therapy was that I always left the therapy session with some sort of actionable steps. I didn't want my therapy sessions to turn into like a vent fest, even though I feel like there is, a lot of healing in venting and getting out all of your feelings. I think that's really important too. But if I spent an hour venting to her and just left, I didn't feel like I was able to do anything until the next week when I came back. So
because it's draining. It's emotionally draining. Regurgitating those things, I told you, I'm a counsellor myself, and it's ironic that it happened to me, but it does. It can happen to anybody off the street. But also, I think you look back at like the programming in your own brain of, why did I also tolerate this? So I know your friends say, why don't you leave? But also you sort of reflecting and go, why was my self-esteem so low? Or why was my acceptance level of this behavior at this threshold? Why did I not question it? Was I not able to? Or would it have caused a fight? Would it have caused an argue? And I think also you have to look back at that and say, okay, there's things I need to take responsibility for too.
I was just going to say that. I was absolutely just going to say that, because one of the very first things that I did through my therapy sessions was learn to forgive myself for the things that I overlooked and the things that I permitted and the things that I just said, oh, well, he's in a bad mood, or, oh, well, if I do better, he will be better. I had to forgive myself for those things. And I think a lot of times people get that confused, because it's like, well, you were the victim. You didn't do anything wrong. A lot of people say that, and that's true. Abuse is abuse, right? And the responsibility lies on the abuser. However, in order to heal, I had to look and see what my part was in it. Yes. What was my part? Why didn't I leave? What was it about me that permitted some of the things that happened to me? Yeah. And I know that doesn't apply in every situation, but for me, I definitely had to take some responsibility for what my part was.
It's healthy to do self-reflection. It's not about ego or self-blame or, a lot of victims also, because the narcissist is so covert and so clever and manipulative, they do blame you. So you do question everything. One of our favorite words is sorry. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I can recall my friend, and I can recall people that I've counselled saying, I'm sorry I called you. I'm sorry I've told you my problems. I'm sorry that I'm calling you. I'm sorry that I'm all... No. And that is so hard for them to speak up in the first place. you know? And this is what I mean, that not everybody will understand. But we do sometimes, a bit like the Michael Jackson song that I'm sure I've mentioned many, many times before in different podcasts, you do have to start with the person in the mirror. You know, and you start with self-affirmations of, you know, saying to yourself, it's okay, you're safe now. It's okay, you didn't do anything to bring this to you. You just happened to make the wrong choice with the wrong person. You had certain expectations, they didn't work out. You didn't know they were going to turn out like this, you know. If you were looking for love, for example, like you were 19, bless you, you were young. I was in my 30s, my late 30s, you know, and I'd experienced people that were narcissistic and controlling and abusive and all sorts. But I personally realised I'd fallen into a pattern. You know, my particular person planned it from the beginning. And initially, it was all, you know, roses and sunshine and fun and laughter. And the covert narcissism was creeping in, and I didn't see it till later on. Till the 3 years, you know, 6 years together, 3 years towards the end, it started slowly chipping away. Yeah? So these people, you know, they're very manipulative. And you do have to say to yourself, it's okay. And you sort of like, some of the work I've been doing with counselling is working on your inner child. You know, there's a lot of us that have inner child wounds. And we don't say to that person, you know, let me hold your hand and let me walk you through this. And it's okay. I'm going to give you a hug, you know. And I know to some people this sounds stupid, but you're just reassuring that wounded person that you're going to be all right and it's going to be okay. Okay? And you've not done anything wrong. It's just this was the situation you were in. This was the predicament you were in. But now you're trying your best to come out of it, you know? And that also is hard.
Well, and it's like, to me, I kind of compare it to like a computer. You know, we are programmed from the moment that we're born, from what our parents say to us, to how we're treated by people, from teachers at school, every friend that we have, all the things create this program. And then once we end up in later in life, that programming continues. And in my case, a lot of my program happened in my adult years. So now I'm deprogramming myself. Now I have to go back and deprogram and rewrite the program in my computer to heal. Because just because the pathway says I have to go this way, because that's my programming, doesn't mean I can't rewrite it and go a different pathway. And that's what I have to do.
It's similar to what I said to you about the Pavlov's dogs, that, you know, you're reconditioning yourself, you know, you're reconditioning the things you've been accustomed to. You know, for example, the narcissist can be very, very covert in financial abuse. You know, they control every aspect of how much money you spend on you or your child. And it's almost equating it to your worth. You know, for example, giving you $1 for you and your children to go and spend outside. What meal can you possibly purchase? Do you get what I'm saying to you?
Well,
you know?
I was extremely financially abused. That was a main theme of our marriage, because he was, I think he was a cerebral narcissist. That's just my opinion, but there was a lot of manipulation when it came to money, a lot of control about the finances, a lot of things that were said, like, you can't do this, you can't spend that. We're scrutinizing receipts. I want to see everything that you purchase, everything that you buy. I make the money, you don't make the money. You know, but then it was totally fine for him to go out and buy like an $800 crossbow to hunt with or something.
Lots of double standards,
completely.
Lots of hypocrisy. Yeah.
Right.
How did you?
So that was important.
How did you sort of I guess train yourself to be able to then? That's hard. I can see it.
It's really hard.
It's hard.
It's really hard because now, not only, you know, I'm not with him anymore, but I am completely 100% responsible for my own mortgage, for all of my money that's coming in, all of the money that I spend. I mean, it is really empowering, but it's also really scary. So like when I would go out shopping, and I have a friend who helped me with this, because I would be like, oh, I can't buy that. It's too expensive. What do you mean you can't buy it? But that was just the conditioning that was like, oh, I can't do that. It's too much. Like, and it really, really bothered me. It really hurt me inside to think that, and I'm like, but really, I can't afford it. Yeah. So I've gone through like money mindset mantras, and, you know, I have a person who I work with that helps me in that aspect too, because that was like one of the hardest things to overcome, because it was such a huge theme in, you know, you aren't good with numbers, you don't know how to manage money, I'm the one who makes, you know, and you just start feeling really small and incapable, and now all of a sudden, like, well, I'm not with you anymore, and I make money, I spend money, I'm responsible, you know, so those kinds of things. And the other thing with that is, when you have financial abuse in a situation like this, it's extremely difficult to get out. It's really, really hard for people who have experienced that to get out.
And I think even if it's someone controlling you, or even if you are financially abundant, you find yourself going back to the narcissist because you can't cope without them. You know?
Yes.
So this sounds very strange, but that whole control and that leash, you find it very, very difficult to be in your own empowerment again, you know? And you feel anxious, you feel like something's missing. Like I said, they will make sure you go back, you know? And this is the scenario that I'm saying to you, that, you know, I was stunned when you said 17 years. Like I said to you, there's someone I know that's done it for 40 plus years. And it's exhausting, you know? It's exhausting seeing them, you know, do various things in that marriage or in that relationship, and you're not able to leave. And they will do things where, you know, they will cut off ties. You know, for example, in certain countries where it's hotter climates, you might not be able to go out of your own house. Even though you've got a car, all your neighbours see that you've got a car, but maybe that car hasn't been serviced. Now, somebody might say, well, hold on a minute, just take it to the garage or take it to go get a mechanic. Well, these people make sure you don't, because you're reliant on them to do everything. So in one case, I was stepping in to help this lady, and I'm very car minded. My father, God bless him, and my uncle was a mechanic. So ever since I was young, my dad and I were popping under the hood, and we were changing the oil on cars. I'm talking back in the day, because now in England it's not allowed. But when I was like under 10 years old, we were always, you know, he was changing the oil filter, the air filter, he was changing the spark plugs. And I grew up, you know, with that sort of like mentality. My dad won't recognise it, but he's given me a lot of strength, a lot of tools that I've found to my advantage in my later on in, you know, adult years. But there is a lot of females out there that aren't. They're very reliant on a male person to do everything. And I tried my hardest with this person to actually, for me to physically get her car keys. It was that bad. She wouldn't even give me the car keys to just even lift up the bonnet or the hood so that I could check. Was it, for example, a simple case of you need to put water in the car so the radiator's fine? Do you need to just check your oil levels? Is it the fact that you've run out of gas in your air conditioning cylinder? You know, and I was telling her all these things, and I'm saying these are so simple, but it made me realize I want to help females more, you know. And I'm not saying everybody should be helped like that, because some people are, they can do it themselves. But this is what they do. The narcissist will take away all those things so that you are reliant on them completely. And then there's that fear. Like I said, this individual had fear of me being seen outside with their car. You know, if the neighbours might say something to this person, the doorman might say something, and then I'm in trouble. I will get this, and you know that anxiety sets in. Yep. So it's very, very difficult if you are also trying to help someone leave, because they've been so conditioned they don't see it, and they're not just in this prison that's a mental prison. It's a physical prison as well, and it's a spiritual prison. Sometimes a religious, prison. Sometimes they use a religion against you. You know, it's not easy.
It's extremely scary. It's very scary for people, especially. I have a friend who lives in the UK, and she's going through the same exact thing right now. And her abusive, narcissistic ex is physically abusive as well. Yeah. And so she is extremely scared of doing anything wrong, and she's gone. She's away from him in a shelter right now. But they're dealing with the court systems and things like that. And it's so. I mean, I can hear it in her voice, like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that. Oh, what if he finds out?" It's very hard. Scary for people. It's extremely scary.
She's very fortunate to find a shelter. I mean, that's another good point you've made, because You know, sometimes when we leave and say we leave in the middle of the night, these things happen. When we decide to leave the narcissist, like the game of chess that I said to you earlier, we're thinking about it 20 steps before. It's just that we've not taken the plunge yet. We might have that bag ready, we might have the money ready or the support ready, but we've just not physically walked out the door yet. But we're waiting for that push, you know?
Yep.
And we know that when we're gone, there's no going back. Sometimes we're dragged back, sometimes we're forced back, sometimes they you know, love bombers to go back. You know, oh, you know, it'll be different, it'll be this, it'll be that. One of the most recent things I encountered through my divorce, it just made me laugh my head off. And I did have to laugh. And I think this was part of my therapy to myself, was when a friend got involved, I had blocked all numbers, all contact, all everything. And a friend who I had spoke to once, that was my ex-husband's best friend of like 20 plus, nearly 30 plus years friendship, decided to ring me. Yeah, never had had any relationship with me during the marriage or anything like that, but decided to fix our marriage, you know. And it was a case of like, oh, I think you just been like too you know, too upfront about this, and you should forgive, and you should do this, and you should do that. And then what made me laugh was when this person turned around and said, because you're at this age, you're not going to get anyone else. And I had just sat there and laughed my head off. And I said, are you for real? Like, seriously, have you just heard what you've just said to yourself? Like, so you think I'm that broken, and I'm that, because, you know, to be honest, if someone else hadn't healed, I'm not making a joke of this, by the way, but if you hadn't healed, and if you hadn't got that self-empowerment and self-love, you would probably go back when they say to you, you're not going to get someone else, and you're lucky to have so-and-so. Well, tell me what's lucky to have about this person. Please tell me. I said, these are the things this person's done that's broken our marriage. I listed them off. Okay? And you're telling me that all can be fixed and resolved and sorted? No. I'm done. That's why that person's blocked. That's why the family's blocked. Oh, well, the family want to say, sorry, I've heard it before. You know, this is becoming a running mill. You had a time, you had the things to forgive, and I'm all for forgiving and forgetting, and I wish that person peace, but no. And I just sat back and thought it was so funny that they would use because I'm 43, so they were going to use my age against me. My ex-husband is 42. Okay, so there's only 1 year difference. But to insinuate that a female won't be able to find someone else at that stage of life. And I said, look, I'm happy on my own. I was on my own for 15 years before I met my husband. I was traveling, living, I wasn't married. So what in your head thinks that? You know, there's this whole concept of this like trying to win you round, and they'll get other people involved to do their dirty work when they can't get to you.
Yeah, that happened to me too. I mean, and you know, but like you said with the chess pieces, I knew that was going to happen because I had done my research about flying monkeys and all of that. So I went to every person in my family and I said, please do not talk to him because I know he's going to reach out to you. Please do not engage with him. Please, you know, and I told them and I explained, and it's hard for those kinds of people to really grasp, like, what's the big deal? Like, he's been your husband for the last 17 years. Like, what if he wants to talk to us because you're getting divorced? And no.
Yeah,
there's a motive.
They don't get I think I'm going to call it cold turkey, because it's going cold turkey, you know, and you're cutting all contact, but you're doing it because you need that distance, and you need to put barriers back in place, because before there weren't any. It's you protecting yourself and your children or whoever's involved in your life, but also you're respecting yourself. You're showing you, you know, excuse me, no. If you want to call, you do this.
And that you had a laugh in your story, and a similar story to me happened.
I had to, because I was like, what the hell?
Well, my ex, we were just separated, and because I had previously mentioned that my mom and I were estranged through the majority of our marriage, because he didn't want me around my mom, and, you know, kind of pushed her out to the side. well, my mom was one of the very first people that helped me when I decided I was going to leave. And he, one day, this was shortly after I had told him I was divorcing him, went, and he didn't talk to my mom. Like, this is the person who, when he would go to, if he went to her house, like on a holiday that I was able to convince him to go to for an hour, would sit in the corner like a bump on the log and refuse to eat the food that was served and wouldn't talk to anyone and made it really uncomfortable. Yeah. So this is the person who didn't speak to my mom for, and treated her very poorly for, the time that we were married, went to her house at like 11 o'clock at night, and she came around to the backyard with a bottle of bourbon and ice cream as a gift for my mom, and sat and talked to my mom for 2 hours in her house and told her how sorry he was and how he wanted me back and he would never do that again. And I was like, Mom, why did you let him in? Why did you talk to him?
It was the bourbon, obviously. Bourbon
she's
works.
like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I'm like, oh.
You make a good point, because you see, what they do is they will do things like this. They've made sure that you're isolated from that person, so they come along with gifts. I'm not the bad guy or female that this person has made me out to be. Hear me out. You've heard it all wrong. And this is what I'm saying about them being amazing actors or actresses. They are able to wrap people around their finger and manipulate. This has happened to someone I know, where the ex-partner is turning up at the mother's house, knowing full well that the ex-partner is not there, but has done it to intimidate, because that's your weakness. Like in a game of chess, it's your pawns. Go to the pawns first. Who am I going to checkmate after that? Who's next? But let's start at your weakest link. Let's intimidate, because you're going to have to force yourself to come out of wherever you are in hiding, or call me. If you've changed your number, you're going to have to call me to say, go away. Right?
Exactly.
And technically, by law, in a lot of places, it's not illegal to turn up to somebody's house. Now, you might be trespassing on their land, but if you're clever and wise like these people are, because they are clever. For example, driving up and down this person's street consistently for about an hour. So driving up and down, now that's not illegal, but it's harassment.
Right.
But it's not classed as harassment. Do you get me?
It's intimidating. It's extremely intimidating.
But that's what they do, because they know they can get away with it. These people are sly, very sly. And this is what they do. They do that covertness to try and lure you out, to try and manipulate the family and friends. And your family's there going, but they're nice. I had a nice chat with them. Your mum was probably the same, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she said he seemed really sincere, and I was like, oh, he's not. He's a manipulator. He's doing this for a motive of his own
Some
selfish
of them deserve
desire.
Oscars. The worst narcissist goes too. Now, guys, those of you that are listening, I'm not mimicking. I'm not taking the Michael, as we say back home. But this is serious. These people are very clever at what they do. Very, very, very cunning. Very cunning. And that's why when we leave, people are shocked. They don't see that side. They don't see the fact that some people are running for their lives. Mm-hmm. They are in absolute fear, because this person will kill them. And sadly, very, very sadly, sometimes that happens.
It does. And that's the scariest part. I mean, I remember like I said, he didn't physically harm me, like as far as like punch me or shove me, wrist grabbing, blocking my way. I believe all are forms of abuse as well. If you or coercion, things like that. Yes. But he intimidated me and said, "Oh yeah, I could totally kill you and bury your body and no one would ever find you." And so things like, and say it very coolly, not even scarily, just like very calm, and I could totally do that to you and no one would ever find you.
And the fact that thought about it is alarming.
Exactly.
And when you're in that place of fear, they're speaking truth. They're not just talking, sorry to say this phrase, but I can't think of another way to say it, but they're not talking out their ass. They're laying the cards on the table. They're not doing poker face. They're saying, this is what I'm going to do to you. This is what will happen. And when you're in that volatile, it's a volatile, abusive, psychotic relationship that you think is love, and it's not, but you know that person is speaking truth. You're in fear. You're in fear. When I was told by my ex-husband, I am going to kill you, and it wasn't just one time, it was several times, and the family got involved, and various other people got involved. And the recent friend had said to me, no, you misunderstood. I went, no, that you can't misunderstand. Someone clearly saying to you, I am going to kill you. Right. And I'm going to make sure that I hunt you down, I make your life hell, and they have done, and don't get me wrong, I was very panicky, and despite not even being very in close proximity of that, ex-husband, but still the feelings of anxiety are there, the stress is there, the paranoia is there, looking over your shoulder, looking over things that you're doing, whether it's everyday things like opening your door, expecting someone, someone you might down the street, even if you've taken a walk, someone reminds you of them, they might physically look like them, it really triggers you. We all have these different trigger points. And then to the point where you want to put a restraining order in, but you can't. Or, these things go against us. Like I said to you, when I had got over that scenario out of my situation, I just blew up. As in verbally. I blew up. And I had got to the point where out of nowhere, despite being loud and bubbly and whatever I am, but I was like, excuse me? Did you just threaten to kill me? Like, how? How are you going to do that? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are threatening me? Yeah? And that was like a turning point for me. I erupted like this volcano. And home truths came back. And that was one of the reasons when it was my 43rd birthday in May, and I thought to myself, what have I not done in my life yet that's on the bucket list? Oh yeah, let's go and go to the gun range. So let's go and train yourself. Not that I'm going to ever go and use a weapon against anyone and harm them, because I'm not like that. But it was something I felt pushed to do. Like, this is my Sarah O'Connor stage in my life, as I said to you.
Yeah.
I need to be strapped, I need to be armed, I need to be ready. And I have kept up with that, and I am going to keep up with it, because it's mentally got me prepared. It made me come out of victim mode to strength. And some people won't bounce back that quick. I'm different,
Yeah, and I think when it comes to healing yourself, everybody's healing journey is so different. Whereas something like that is something that you like, I'm going to do this, and this is going to help me feel empowered. Where someone else, it could be something as simple as just saying no. Yes. Like that they've never been able to say no. They've never been able to tell their friend who invited them to their child's birthday party that they don't want to come. Yes. Like, that could be as simple as feeling empowered as what you're doing.
Empowering can be blocking their number. It can be deleting their number. It can be deleting their photos. It can be you moving forward with your life and starting again. Empowering can be very different stages, like we've said, Yeah. And this is a good thing now. Now we're looking at how we move forward and how we rebuild our lives. Because, like you said, you're still having counselling. I'm actually counselling others. I think that helps that in some respects I'm counselling them, they're counselling me, because we can relate, and not everybody will understand. And you have to come out the other side of this, You start looking after you. You start looking after, maybe you've neglected your skin, your routine, your sleep, It might be you've neglected friends, hobbies. Like you've said, there's certain things. You started writing. It's cathartic to write. I recently published a book of mine that I'd been working on for a year called Diary of Abuse by a Loved One. I'm going to do another podcast about that another time. But I do actually discuss similar topics to what we're discussing in that book, because we're not helping people like we should do. We are trying. We're trying in society, but there's still a lot of places across the world, internationally. This podcast is heard by lots of people. There is still places out there, people out there that keep it quiet, Before we finish, what advice would you give those individuals, Allison, based on what you've gone through?
Okay, so the very first thing that I would recommend would be to reconnect with yourself, because I feel like that we miss that a lot when we grow up, And I've heard people say to me, women and men alike, who they have negative self-talk. They say things like, I can't do that, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm not good enough, or, I just don't have the strength. But truly, if you look at the child version of yourself, if that 4-year-old little girl were sitting there, you wouldn't tell that 4-year-old child those things. You wouldn't look at her in the eyes and say, you're not strong enough. You're not good enough. You don't have the abilities to escape this or get out of this. You wouldn't say those types of things. You need, in my opinion, you need to treat that inner child version of yourself like it is a child. You would encourage that child.
Yeah, with compassion and with love and with TLC, tender loving care. But
absolutely,
sometimes loving self is hard. When you're coming out of this narcissistic hole, it's almost like Alice in Wonderland. You've fallen down this big hole in the ground. You didn't realize what you got yourself into until you're trying to get out. And
it's work. It is absolutely work. Like a lot of people also say, well, how long until you heal, or how long is it going to take, and am I ever going to be happy again? And to me, it is possible, because I'm living proof of it. Yeah, but you have to put the work in. You have to put the work in. You can't just wait for it to pass. I posted something the other day. It said, you have to remove the thorn. The pain might go away over time, but you have to get that thorn out. You have to dig it out, and it takes a lot of work.
This goes back to what I said earlier, doesn't it, about the patterns of behavior. If you are someone that's had low self-esteem, low confidence, if you've not worked on the inner reasons as to why these things have happened to you, or you've allowed them to happen to you, then you're not going to heal. We all have scars. I said that to you earlier, but you make something out of it. Don't look at a scar as a war wound. Don't look at that internal or physical or emotional scar as something that's going to hold you back. Move forward with your life. Close that chapter. Look at yourself. There's so many things, like personally for me, there's so many things I had given up on, and I was frustrated. I want to travel. I want to see the world. There was times I wanted to just even go to a new museum that was an hour away or 30 minutes away. These were all battles I had all the time. Now I'm at the point where I'm just liberated, and I'm just taking one day at a time. I'm not setting myself any huge, massive goals. Yes, there's things I want to do, but I work on me. I work on myself, and I work on my healing. Sometimes it's like catching up on sleep. Might sound silly, but that's been a luxury. Before, because of these issues and the way that they do things, some of us are so anxious we can't sleep. Our sleep patterns have been disturbed. Our eating habits have been disturbed. Our bodies go through different changes. Through stress, through anxiety, your hair falls out, your skin is not great. You might put weight on, weight off. All of our bodies have fluctuated differently. So that self-care that you're talking about, whether it's starting yoga or swimming or meditation or just simple things like sleeping. I'm not saying sleep at work, but do like a baby nap. Give yourself a bit of you time. It's okay to have an extra hour in bed. It's okay to go and make yourself breakfast. For example, these might be small steps you do that are helping you. It might be that you couldn't eat. Some of us do go through phases of not being able to nourish ourselves, and sometimes the food is also a clever one, because there are times when we don't eat, or we eat the wrong things, or we're programmed to think that, we don't deserve, for example, this type of quality of food that might be a little bit more expensive. It might be $1 more, it might be £1 more, but because we've been brainwashed not to have it, our bodies notice, So, go on.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you had mentioned about taking steps and doing things that you want to do. And some of these are big goals for you, and some of them can be really small. When you were talking about food, one of the things that I remember clearly was one day I decided I was going to go to Dairy Queen and get me a blizzard, which was like ice cream and cookies all mixed in. And I just was never really permitted to do that. And
sounds very Moorish.
I would have had to go to the store. I would have had to buy the ice cream, buy the cookies, make it myself at home because it was cheaper that way. Yeah, and I just remember feeling so empowered just going to the store and using my money and buying the ice cream I wanted to and not having to go make it by hand. And that was just even something that small was really empowering for me and healing. It was really healing too.
It's about rewarding yourself, isn't it? And it's about we're not advising people, by the way, if anyone's listening, we're not saying go and be obese and go, be diabetic or whatever, because you got to be sensible with people tuning in. We're talking about a little bit of indulgence that just allows you to sort of like recalibrate things and sort of put you first, because we can relate to these things. So, Allison, any last thoughts or any last words? Obviously, we'll put the details of your book in the podcast at the bottom. Obviously, you can find out more about Allison's book. I'll put the link in if you want to purchase it. Please do so, I will put the link in the feed for you to do that. But Allison, is there any last thoughts before we finish this podcast?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed being here and talking with you. The one thing that I will just tell everybody who's listening is that there is hope outside of this type of abuse. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And, you'll feel like at some point that you're at the lowest that you could possibly ever be. You'll feel like you're in this swamp with rainstorms and alligators and snakes, and you can't see and it's dark. But people like you and me, Miriam, we're on the other side, and we're going to shout to you and tell you how to come out of that. And that's what I hope to do for everyone.
Yeah, and you're not on your own. And it doesn't matter which stage of your journey you're at. I think sometimes the fact that you recognize that this is a narcissistic abuse. You were in it, for example, for 17 years. Someone I know is in it plus 40 years. I was in it for 6. And it was only the last 3 that I really realised, something's really not right, Yeah. And it's also recognising these are the triggers, because we don't know what they are. But also the steps to get out, the healthy steps to move forward, and the healthy steps to restart your life again, because you can. And it doesn't matter if someone rings you up and says, you won't be able to get another partner at this age. So what? I'm happy in myself. And it's knowing that you have to start loving you. Don't let anybody knock you down. Don't let anybody knock your self-confidence and your self-esteem. Start loving you. Start loving you again. That's the best journey to recovery. Yeah.
Love that.
So from Allison and myself, thank you for tuning in. I'm sure this has been an emotional podcast for quite a lot of our listeners, Allison. And if you do have questions for any of us, then obviously please, put them in the feed. The two of us will get back to you. But we wish you, the best, don't we, Allison, on your recovery and getting out of it. And please read Allison's book. God bless. Take care. Allison, do you want to say anything before we go?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And also, too, I have a presence on Instagram and Facebook. So if anybody, would like to reach out, you can reach me in my DMs as well.
Again, I'll put that in the feed once we finish this podcast. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you.
Hope that helps someone. Bye for now.